Henry and Emily's marriage was everything they had dreamed of and more. Their home was filled with warmth, laughter, and the kind of love that could weather any storm. Emily, with her kind heart and humble ways, brought peace into Henry's life, and he often said, "Emily, you're my blessing, my safe place." Emily wasn't just Henry's wife, she was his partner in every sense of the word. Together they built a life grounded in trust and understanding, and their days felt brighter just because they had each other. Kemi, Henry's mother, watched their love grow with pride and happiness. After everything she had been through to raise Henry alone, seeing him find a woman as sincere and loving as Emily made her heart swell. She lived simply in her small home, despite Henry's insistence that she move into his mansion. "This is where I belong," Kemi would say with a soft smile. "This house holds all our memories, our beginnings. It's enough for me." Even as she enjoyed her son's success and happiness, Kemi couldn't help but think about the past. Memories of Femi, the man who had abandoned her and Henry, crept into her mind. She rarely spoke of him, but late at night she wondered if he ever thought of her, of the family he had left behind. Did he regret his choices? Did he feel the weight of what he had lost? Meanwhile, miles away, Femi was living in a shadow of his former life. The man who once walked away from Kemi and their son now found himself completely alone. The children he had raised weren't his, and his wife, the woman he chose over Kemi, had betrayed him in the worst way. Femi sat in his small, empty house, drowning in regret. For years, he had pushed thoughts of Kemi and Henry to the back of his mind, convincing himself it was for the best. But now, as the truth of his broken family came to light, all he could think about was the life he had walked away from. "I should have stayed," he muttered, staring at a photo of Henry he had recently seen online, and how successful he had become despite not having a father in his life. I should have been there for him. For both of them, Femi's life had crumbled in ways he never expected. For years he had built a home and a family with his wife Amanda, believing it was a fresh start after leaving Kemi behind. But the foundation of his life was about to be shaken to its core. It started with a heated argument between him and Amanda. Their relationship, once built on laughter and promises, had become strained. The fights were frequent, and the distance between them grew. On this particular evening, Amanda's voice cracked as she screamed, "Femi, I'm tired of pretending." "Pretending?" Femi asked, his voice rising. "What are you talking about?" Amanda broke down in tears, clutching the edge of the dining table for support. "They're not your children, Femi," she whispered, barely audible. The room went silent. Femi felt like the air had been knocked out of him. "What did you just say?" he asked, his voice trembling. "They're not yours," Amanda repeated, sobbing now. "I lied to you. The children are Michael's. He was my boyfriend back in university. We reconnected before I met you and—" Her voice trailed off, but the damage was done. Femi stared at her, his mind racing. His children, his pride, his reason for staying in the marriage even when things got tough, weren't his. "You've been lying to me all these years?" he finally managed to say. Amanda nodded. "I thought I could move on, but I couldn't. I still love him, Femi. Michael and we've been talking, and I've decided to go back to him. The kids belong with their real father." Femi felt his world collapse around him. The family he had sacrificed everything for wasn't his to begin with. He had decided to do a DNA test which confirmed Amanda's word, much to his utter dismay. And now Amanda was leaving, taking the children with her. The betrayal cut deep. But deeper still was the void left by the realization that he was utterly alone. He had lost his two children, children he had raised as his. Femi had met Amanda at a corporate networking event years ago. She was stunning, confident, and full of charm. At the time, he had been looking for something new, something that could erase the memories of Kemi. Amanda seemed perfect. She was eager to settle down, and before long, they were married. When Amanda announced her pregnancy shortly after, Femi felt a sense of relief. "This is my second chance," he had thought. "A chance to do things right, to start afresh." But there were signs, small inconsistencies that Femi brushed aside. Amanda's hesitation when asked about her past, the way she avoided certain topics, her late nights, and the peculiar way she spoke about her old university friends. He ignored them all, convincing himself that every relationship had its secrets. As the years went by, Amanda's true feelings began to surface. She grew distant, often disappearing for hours, claiming she was visiting friends or handling errands. Femi tried to hold the family together, but the more he tried, the more things unraveled. After Amanda left, Femi sat alone in the house that once felt full of life. The silence was deafening. Tears streamed down Femi's face as he whispered, "I had the chance to have a family once. A real family." Memories of Kemi flooded his mind. Her strength, her kindness, the way she had fought to keep their family together even when he had failed her. He thought of Henry, the son he had abandoned, now a grown man with a life of his own, and very successful too. "I need to make things right," Femi said to himself. It wouldn't be easy, and he knew he had no right to ask for forgiveness, but he had to try, for Kemi, for Henry, for himself. The air was filled with joy and laughter as Henry and Emily celebrated their 1-year anniversary. The small gathering of close friends and family took place in their beautiful garden, adorned with fairy lights and soft music playing in the background. Emily, radiant in a simple white dress, smiled at Henry, who couldn't take his eyes off her. Kemi watched the couple from a corner of the garden, her heart brimming with pride and gratitude. Her son had found a woman who truly loved him, a woman who stood by his side through thick and thin. As she sipped her drink, she thought back to the struggles they had faced together. "God has been faithful," she whispered to herself. When it was time for speeches, Henry stood up and held Emily's hand. "This year has been the best of my life because of you," he said. "Emily, you've shown me what true love means. I promise to keep loving you, growing with you, and protecting what we have." Emily's eyes filled with tears as she responded, "You've given me a love I never thought I deserved. You've made me stronger, Henry. Thank you for being my home." The crowd cheered as Henry kissed Emily, sealing their vows with heartfelt applause. Kemi wiped a tear from her eye. She felt a deep sense of fulfillment knowing that her sacrifices had not been in vain. A few days after the celebration, an unexpected storm rolled into their lives. Jane, the woman who had once tried to trap Henry, reappeared. She had been watching from the shadows, filled with jealousy as she saw Henry's life unfold with Emily. It ate at her to see him so happy, knowing she had been cast aside. Jane had spent the past year plotting her revenge. She was determined to destroy the life Henry had built and reclaim what she believed was hers. "If I can't have him," she muttered to herself, "then no one will." The days following Henry and Emily's anniversary were filled with joy and gratitude. Emily often found herself reflecting on how much they had grown together, while Henry remained dedicated to building their future. Kemi, watching from the sidelines, felt a profound sense of pride. She thanked God daily for the peace her son had found and the woman who loved him so purely. But storms don't always announce their arrival. One evening, Henry attended a high-profile charity gala on behalf of his company. Emily had chosen to stay home, feeling under the weather. "You go ahead, love," she told him with a reassuring smile. "I'll be fine." The gala was grand, with influential figures networking under the glow of crystal chandeliers. Jane, who had been lying in wait for her opportunity, made her move. Dressed in a striking gown, she approached Henry casually, pretending to bump into him. "Henry," she said, her voice smooth and familiar. "It's been a while." Henry stiffened at the sight of her. "Jane," he replied coldly, "what are you doing here?" "Relax," she said with a small laugh. "I'm just here for the charity. It's good to see you." Henry kept the interaction brief, unwilling to entertain her further. But Jane was relentless. Throughout the night, she maneuvered herself into Henry's space, acting friendly and warm. At one point, she offered him a drink, which he accepted without suspicion. Hours later, Henry's head swirled with confusion as the drink's effects took hold. His memory blurred and everything around him became a haze. He vaguely remembered Jane helping him into a car, but beyond that, nothing. The next morning, Henry woke up in a hotel room, his heart pounding as he realized Jane was there with him. She sat at the edge of the bed looking smug. "What's going on?" Henry demanded, his voice hoarse. Jane smiled wickedly. "Relax, Henry," she said. "You had a bit too much to drink. I helped you out." Henry looked around, his panic rising. "What are you talking about? Nothing happened between us." Jane shrugged, her smile not faltering. If that's what you want to believe. He stood abruptly, anger surging. Jane, listen to me. Whatever you think happened last night didn't. Stay away from me. Jane chuckled as she watched him leave. We'll see about that, Henry, she murmured to herself. For 2 weeks, Henry tried to forget about the incident. He told no one, choosing to bury the memory and move on with his life. Things returned to normal, or so he thought. One afternoon, as Henry worked in his office, Jane walked in unannounced. She closed the door behind her, her expression one of feigned concern. What are you doing here? Henry snapped, his frustration evident. Jane reached into her bag and pulled out a folded piece of paper. I thought you should know, she said, holding it out to him. Henry unfolded the paper, his eyes scanning the words. It was a positive pregnancy test result. You're lying, he said flatly, looking up at her. Jane raised an eyebrow, her tone calm but icy. You can deny it all you want, but the baby is yours, Henry. No, he said firmly. Nothing happened between us. You drugged me, Jane. You're not going to manipulate me into believing your lies. Jane crossed her arms, smirking. Think what you want, but the world won't see it that way. Imagine what Emily would think. Imagine how this will affect your perfect little life. Henry clenched his fists, his mind racing. Jane's words struck a nerve, and he couldn't ignore the risk of her lies spreading. What do you want? He asked through gritted teeth. I'll let you figure that out, she said with a sly smile, walking out of the office. That evening, Henry came home distracted. Emily noticed immediately. Henry, is everything okay? She asked gently. He forced a smile. Just a long day at work. Nothing to worry about. But Emily wasn't convinced. The man she knew so well seemed distant, and it unsettled her. Over the following days, Henry grew more withdrawn, consumed by the weight of Jane's threat. Emily's concern deepened, though she didn't press him, hoping he would open up in his own time. It was past midnight when Emily was awakened by the faint buzz of Henry's phone on the bedside table. She reached for it absent-mindedly, intending to turn it off so it wouldn't disturb his sleep. But the message on the screen caught her eye. It was from Jane. Don't ignore me, Henry. You know I'm carrying your child. We need to talk about this. Emily froze, her heart beating very fast. The words blurred as tears filled her eyes. She glanced at Henry, who was sound asleep, completely unaware of the storm brewing beside him. The next morning, Emily couldn't hold back any longer. As Henry came down for breakfast, she placed the phone on the table, her expression a mixture of hurt and anger. Care to explain this? She asked, her voice trembling. Henry picked up the phone and read the message. His face paled as he realized what had happened. Emily? I can explain, he began, but she cut him off. How long have you been keeping this from me? She demanded. You promised me honesty, Henry. Why didn't you tell me about this? I didn't want to worry you, Henry said, his voice desperate. Jane is lying, Emily. She's trying to set me up. Nothing happened. Then why is she saying she's pregnant with your child? Emily asked, tears streaming down her face. Do you have any idea how this makes me feel? Kemi walked into the room just as Emily broke down. What's going on here? She asked, her eyes darting between the two. Emily handed her the phone. As Kemi read the message, her expression hardened. This woman again, she said quietly but firmly. I knew she would try something like this. Turning to Henry, Kemi asked, You're sure nothing happened? Absolutely nothing, Henry insisted. She drugged me, Mom. She's trying to trap me. Kemi placed a comforting hand on Emily's shoulder. Listen to me, Emily. I've seen this before. Jane tried to do this to Henry once, and I wouldn't be surprised if she's doing it again, but we'll get to the bottom of this. Kemi wasted no time. She started digging into Jane's life, determined to find the truth. Her instincts told her Jane's pregnancy was real, but she also suspected that the child wasn't Henry's. The thought of Jane causing turmoil in her family again made Kemi even more determined to uncover the truth. Determined to protect her family, Kemi began digging into Jane's life. She reached out to friends and acquaintances who might know more about Jane's recent activities. It didn't take long for rumors to surface. Whispers of Jane's past relationships and questionable decisions painted a picture that confirmed Kemi's suspicions. As Kemi delved deeper, she realized she needed professional help to gather concrete evidence. During her investigation, Kemi came across Fred Adeyemi, a private investigator she hired to help gather information in his late 40s. Fred was charming, kind, and incredibly supportive of her efforts. "We'll get to the truth, Madam Kemi," he said with a reassuring smile. Over time, Kemi found herself opening up to Fred, sharing stories of her struggles as a single mother and her hopes for her family. Fred, in turn, shared how he had lost his wife 10 years ago, and his 2 children were now both married and abroad. Fred's investigation uncovered shocking evidence. Jane had been in a relationship with another man shortly before the gala, where she set up Henry. More importantly, they discovered medical records indicating that Jane had been pregnant earlier that year, but had terminated the pregnancy. Kemi's heart ached as she pieced everything together. Jane had likely conceived with someone else before her encounter with Henry, and was now trying to use her current pregnancy to trap him. As Kemi focused on gathering evidence, her phone rang one evening. The number was unfamiliar, but the voice on the other end was unmistakable. "Kemi," Femi said softly. "It's been a long time. I need to see you." Kemi's heart raced. She wasn't ready to face him, but something in his tone made her pause. "Why now, Femi?" she asked, her voice steady despite the whirlwind of emotions. "I have things I need to say," he replied. "Please, Kemi, just give me a chance." After a long silence, Kemi relented. "All right, we'll meet." Between protecting Henry and Emily from Jane's schemes and preparing herself emotionally to meet Femi, Kemi felt stretched thin. Yet she refused to give up. Her love for her son and her desire for justice fueled her every step. Each day brought new challenges, but it also brought clarity. Kemi knew that to protect her family and move forward, she had to face the ghosts of the past and the manipulations of the present head on. Kemi sat at her kitchen table, the weight of everything pressing down on her. She had spent weeks gathering evidence to expose Jane's schemes, pouring her energy into protecting Henry and Emily. But for the first time in years, she felt something unfamiliar. Hope. Fred Adeyemi had been by her side every step of the way, and his presence brought a comfort she didn't know she needed. "You're stronger than you realize, Kemi," Fred said one afternoon as they reviewed their findings. "You've carried your family through storms most people couldn't survive. You'll get through this too." Kemi looked at him, her eyes searching for the truth in his words. "Sometimes it feels like it's too much," she admitted softly. "I've spent my whole life fighting for Henry, and now it's happening all over again." Fred reached across the table, placing his hand gently over hers. "You're not alone this time," he said, his voice steady. "I'm here, and I'll stay here as long as you need me." Something stirred in Kemi's heart. It had been years since anyone had made her feel truly seen, but just as the warmth began to grow, she pulled back. The scars of her past, of Femi's betrayal, were still there. Kemi had received a message from Femi earlier that week asking to meet. She hesitated but finally agreed, driven by a mix of curiosity and lingering resentment. When they met, Femi looked like a shadow of the man she once knew. His confident demeanor had been replaced by humility, and his eyes carried the weight of years of regret. "Kemi," he began, his voice trembling. "I don't even know where to start." She crossed her arms, her expression guarded. "Start with why you abandoned me," she said coldly. Femi sighed, running a hand over his face. "I was a coward," he admitted. "I wasn't ready to be a father, and I thought walking away was the easy way out. But I was wrong, Kemi. I've been wrong about everything." Kemi felt tears sting her eyes but refused to let them fall. "Do you know what it was like?" she asked, her voice rising. "Raising Henry alone, watching him grow up without a father because you decided we weren't worth it." "I think about it every day," Femi said quietly. "I see what I lost, and it haunts me. But I'm here now, Kemi. I want to make things right." She shook her head, trying to suppress the wave of emotions. "You can't undo the past, Femi, and I can't just forgive you because you've decided it's convenient." "I don't expect it to be easy," he said. "But please, let me meet Henry. He deserves to hear it from me." The meeting between Femi and Henry was tense, to say the least. Henry, initially reluctant, agreed after much persuasion from Kemi. They met at Kemi's home, where she sat quietly in the corner, watching the confrontation unfold. "Henry," Femi began, his voice unsteady, "I don't deserve your forgiveness. but I need you to know how sorry I am. I made the biggest mistake of my life walking away from you and your mother." Henry's jaw tightened, his hands clenched into fists. "You didn't just walk away," he said, his voice low. "You abandoned us. Do you have any idea what that did to us? To her?" Femi hung his head, unable to meet his son's eyes. "I know," he said, "and I'll carry that guilt for the rest of my life. But I'm here now, Henry. I want to be part of your life if you'll let me." Henry stood, pacing the room. "You can't just show up after all these years and expect me to welcome you with open arms," he said bitterly. "But if my mother can put up with you, maybe I can try. But do not expect a loving father and son relationship." Kemi's heart ached as she watched the pain in both of their faces. But beneath the tension, she saw a glimmer of hope, a chance for healing. After the confrontation, Kemi felt emotionally drained. That evening, she found herself sitting on her porch, staring out at the stars. Fred joined her, bringing 2 cups of tea. "You did well today," he said. "It's not easy, facing the past like that." Kemi smiled weakly. "It's exhausting," she admitted, "and I don't know if I have the strength to keep doing this." Fred's voice was gentle but firm. "You have more strength than you know, Kemi, and you don't have to do it alone." For the first time, Kemi allowed herself to imagine a future that wasn't solely about survival. Meeting Femi again has helped her to heal in ways she hadn't expected, and maybe she was finally ready for a new chapter in her life. She glanced at Fred, her heart conflicted. Could she trust herself to let someone in again? As the weeks went on, Kemi and Fred spent more time together, their bond growing stronger. Fred's kindness and steady presence became a source of comfort for Kemi. She found herself laughing again, something she hadn't done in years. But with every step forward, Kemi's fear of repeating the past held her back. One evening, as they sat in the garden, Fred looked at her and said, "You don't have to be afraid, Kemi. I'm not him. I won't hurt you." Tears filled her eyes as she nodded, finally allowing herself to hope. Kemi had always trusted her instincts, and this time they led her closer to the truth than ever. With Fred by her side, she pieced together the story behind Jane's scheme. But as the revelations surfaced, so did tensions within Henry and Emily's marriage. The weight of doubt and betrayal strained their once happy relationship. Since the night Emily discovered Jane's text message, her relationship with Henry had been on shaky ground. She tried to trust him, but the lack of transparency gnawed at her. Each time she looked at him, she saw the possibility of betrayal, no matter how much her heart wanted to believe him. "You should have told me everything from the start," Emily said one evening, her voice heavy with frustration. "How can I trust you when you're hiding things from me?" Henry ran a hand through his hair, his frustration mirroring hers. "Emily, I didn't tell you because I didn't want to hurt you. I wanted to handle it and protect you." "But protecting me means being honest with me," Emily shot back. "I feel like I'm standing in the dark while you're fighting a battle I don't even know about." The distance between them grew as their conversations turned into arguments. Henry felt trapped, and Emily felt abandoned. Their home, once filled with warmth and laughter, became a place of tension and silence. Kemi noticed the strain between her son and daughter-in-law and immediately suspected Jane's manipulation. "I won't let her destroy this family," Kemi thought, her resolve hardening. She sat Emily down one afternoon, speaking to her with the tenderness of a mother. "Emily, I know Henry is a good man," she said, "and I also know Jane has done everything in her power to make you doubt him. Don't let her win." Emily wiped her tears. "It's just so hard, Mama. I want to believe Henry, but this situation, it's tearing us apart." Kemi placed a comforting hand on Emily's. "Then let me help. I'll find the truth. I already have so much evidence, and when I do, you'll see that Henry's love for you is real." Fred's investigation unearthed shocking revelations. Jane had been in a relationship with another man months before the gala, and medical records confirmed she had terminated a pregnancy earlier in the year. "Kemi, look at this," Fred said one evening, spreading documents across the dining table. "These records show that Jane was involved with another man shortly before she orchestrated her scheme with Henry. I got my hands on her pregnancy test report, and the date of her pregnancy shows she was already pregnant before she met Henry." Kemi felt a surge of relief and anger. "She's playing a dangerous game," she said. "But we'll make sure the truth comes out." Kemi nodded, her determination growing. We need to make sure Henry and Emily see this. It's the only way to set things right." To Kemi's surprise, Femi stepped forward to help present the evidence. After their emotional reconciliation, he had been quietly seeking ways to make amends. "Henry," Femi said, placing the documents on the table, "I know I failed you as a father, but I can't stand by and let someone try to ruin your life. This woman is lying, and here's the proof." Henry hesitated, looking between his mother and father. Though his relationship with Femi was still fragile, he saw sincerity in his father's actions. As Henry read the documents, a sense of relief washed over him. "So Jane has been lying this whole time," he said, his voice heavy with emotion. "Emily needs to see this." When Henry showed Emily the evidence, her tears flowed freely. "Why didn't you tell me about this sooner?" she asked, her voice cracking. "I was scared, Emily," Henry admitted. "Scared of losing you, scared of how this would affect us. But I should have trusted you from the start." Emily looked at him, the pain in her eyes softening. "We've been through so much, Henry. I need to know we can face things together, not apart." Henry reached for her hands, his voice filled with resolve. "We can, Emily. I promise, no more secrets." As Jane realized her lies were unraveling, her desperation escalated. She stormed into Henry's office, demanding that he take responsibility for her pregnancy. "You can't walk away from this!" Jane shouted, her voice echoing through the hallways. "You're the father!" Henry remained calm, holding the evidence in his hand. "Jane, this is over. I know about your previous abortions, and I know this child isn't mine. You need to stop this before it gets worse." Realizing she was cornered, Jane broke down, confessing that she had fabricated the story to trap Henry. Her admission brought relief, but also a lingering bitterness for the pain she had caused. With Jane's schemes finally exposed, Kemi allowed herself a moment to breathe. As she sat in her garden one evening, Fred joined her, their bond stronger than ever. "You've been amazing through all of this," Fred said, handing her a cup of tea. "Your family is lucky to have you." Kemi smiled, a warmth spreading through her chest. "I couldn't have done it without you, Fred. You've been my rock." Fred placed his hand over hers, his voice soft. "And I'll always be here for you, Kemi." Her heart fluttered. The house felt different after the truth about Jane had been revealed. For the first time in weeks, the tension that had hung in the air seemed to dissipate. Emily sat on the couch, staring at the evidence Henry had shared with her, the final pieces of proof that cleared his name. Henry knelt in front of her, his hands trembling as he held hers. "Emily," he began, "I should have been honest with you from the start. I let my fear and pride get in the way, and it hurt you. I'm so sorry." Emily looked at him, her eyes glistening with tears. "Henry," she said softly, "I was hurt because I love you. I wanted to believe you, but the doubt, it was too much. Now I see the truth. You didn't betray me. Jane did." Henry's grip on her hands tightened. "I'll spend the rest of my life making it up to you. And as for Jane, she is gone from our lives forever. I made sure of that." Emily leaned forward, wrapping her arms around him. "You don't have to, Henry. I forgive you." The days that followed were filled with happiness and joy. They took long walks together, talked late into the night, and made a conscious effort to rebuild the trust that had been strained. Each moment brought them closer, their bond growing stronger than ever. Weeks later, Emily began to notice changes: exhaustion, nausea, and an unexplainable glow. At Kemi's insistence, she visited a doctor, and the news she received brought her to tears. When Henry returned home that evening, she greeted him with a small box. Inside was a tiny pair of baby shoes and a note that read, "We're going to be parents." Henry stared at the note, his eyes wide with disbelief. "Emily, are you serious?" She nodded, tears streaming down her face. Henry pulled her into his arms, his joy overflowing. "This is the best news of my life," he said. Kemi watched her son and daughter-in-law with pride and gratitude. She had fought so hard to give Henry a good life, and now she was seeing the fruits of her labor. But her own life had also taken an unexpected turn. Fred had become a constant presence, his kindness and patience slowly breaking down the walls Kemi had built around her heart. One evening, as they walked through the neighborhood, Fred took her hand. "Kemi," he said, his voice tender, "you've spent so much of your life giving to others. Let someone take care of you for a change." Kemi smiled, her heart full of hope. "I think I'd like that," she said softly. Femi had been watching from the sidelines, grateful for the forgiveness Kemi and Henry had offered him. He attended family dinners, slowly rebuilding his relationship with his son. Though the loneliness of his choices lingered, he found solace in being a part of their lives again. One evening, as he sat with Kemi, he said, "I'll never forgive myself for what I did, but knowing you and Henry have given me a second chance, it means everything. We can't change the past, Femi, but we can try to build a better future," Kemi said. As Emily and Henry prepared to welcome their child, they decorated the nursery together, choosing soft colors and filling it with love and anticipation. Kemi, now embracing her relationship with Fred, reflected on her journey with a sense of peace. The family gathered one evening for a quiet celebration. As they laughed and shared stories, Kemi looked around the room, at Henry and Emily, who were more in love than ever, at Femi, who was trying to heal, and at Fred, who had brought a new kind of joy into her life. Under the glow of the evening light, she felt a deep sense of fulfillment. Life had been full of challenges, but it had also been full of love and second chances.